Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and it's good to see you all here today. Um, well, we've been discussing the what is referred to as the sixth patriarch, Huineng, who lived in the 7th and early 8th century in China. And it's really kind of a hero's story. And there is this story in Zen Buddhism that the story that there is a unbroken lineage of teachers going all the way back to Shakyamuni Buddha and through India and China, Japan, and now globally to the present day. And Huineng is part of that lineage. There are historical problems with verification of that lineage, but setting that aside, the notion is that the passage of wisdom goes from person to person. So in that sense, we are indebted to our ancestors. So this is the story of Huineng, and it's more or less a hero's story. And last time we talked about how Huineng, who came from the southern hilly part of China, where he lived in a small village supporting his widowed mother by gathering and selling firewood in the marketplace. And then was inspired to come to a monastery farther north where a famous teacher was teaching the Dharma. He presented himself, and the teacher, the abbot, Hong was impressed enough to not send him away, but wasn't impressed enough to make him a novice monk. So he became a worker in the monastery where he hulled rice. And he did this patiently and diligently for 8 months. And that's where our story from today takes up. And I'll just read this. The translation I'm depending on mostly is by Red Pine, and it's taken mostly from documents found in the Dunhuang cave in the early 20th century that date way back in Chinese history. So one day, the fifth patriarch, that's Hun Jin, the teacher, the abbot, suddenly calls all his disciples together. After they had assembled, he said, "I've told you that the greatest concern for human beings is life and death. But you disciples spend your days making offerings, just looking for ways to reap benefit, and not for a way out of the bitter sea of samsara. If you're blind to your own nature, how can you find the doorway to merit? Go back to your rooms and look into yourselves. Those of you who are wise, make use of the prajna wisdom of your own nature. Each of you write me a gatha." That's a short 4-line poem. "Each of you write me a gatha When I read your gathas, if any of you understand what is truly important, I will give you my robe and my Dharma and appoint you as the sixth patriarch. Hurry, as if you're on fire. So the monks did this. They went back to their room, but um, there was a senior monk who was a precept instructor. He was the head monk in the monastery. They all assumed that he would be named the sixth patriarch. So the other monks decided just to pass on writing a poem. They couldn't think of anything good to put down anyway. And likewise, the head monk, Shen Shu, rather, he had trouble coming up with something himself. But then the venerable Shen Shu thought, no one is going to submit a mind poem because I'm their precept instructor. But if I don't submit one, how can the patriarch tell if the understanding of my mind is deep or not? It will be right for me to show the patriarch a poem that reveals my understanding, as long as what I wanted was the Dharma. But it would be wrong as long as what I wanted was the patriarchship. I would be no better than a fool who thinks he can usurp the position of a sage. But if I don't submit a mind poem, I'll never receive the Dharma. As he considered this, he kept thinking, what a predicament. So a familiar thing where he's torn. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know whether he should submit a poem or not. He is also concerned about the look of things, his whether he's going to look like he's being greedy for status. And he doesn't really understand his motivations completely. But finally, at midnight, without letting anyone know, he went to write his poem in the middle of the south corridor wall in hopes of obtaining the robe and the Dharma. This idea of obtaining or receiving the Dharma is kind of like the passage of the teacher's wisdom to the student, and it also comes with it the sort of a credential to teach others. So that's what they mean by the passage of the Dharma or receiving the Dharma. When the patriarch sees my Gatha and reads these words, he thought, if he comes to find me, the moment I see him, I will tell him I wrote it. But when he sees my Gatha, if he says it's not good enough, it will be because I'm deluded and the obstruction of my past karma is too great, and I'm not ready to receive the Dharma. The master's mind is impossible to fathom. I may as well stop worrying about it. So the venerable Shen Shu held up a lantern and wrote his Gatha on the middle of the south corridor wall at midnight, and no one saw him. So he resolves his dilemma by just doing something. And I think we're all familiar with that as well. When when we're just can't really make up our mind, sometimes we end up just doing something in order to put it behind us. His Gatha went. The body is a Bodhi tree. The mind is like a standing mirror. Always try to keep it clean. Don't let it gather dust. Well, the next morning, the abbot saw the poem, and as we'll see, he found it so-so, kind of mediocre. And he thinks to himself, the Diamond Sutra says all images are illusion. It would be better if we kept this gatha for deluded people to recite. If they rely on it for their practice, they won't fall into the three unfortunate states of existence, and it will be a great help to anyone who cultivates the Dharma. The three, by traditional Buddhist cosmology, the three unfortunate states of existence are the animal realm, the realm of pretas or hungry ghosts, and the realm and the hell realm, hell being realm. Because in those realms you just you can't make advancement. You're just kind of stuck. So at least it will keep them out of that and allow them perhaps in a future lifetime to make some advancement. So the fifth patriarch called Shen Shu to, well, first of all, he went out and recommended that all the monks learn this gatha and recite it. They should memorize this gatha and recite it frequently during the day. So they all dutifully did that. Later, the fifth patriarch called Shen Shu to his room and asked, "Did you write the gatha? If you did, you're ready to receive my Dharma." Surprisingly enough, that's what he says. Shen Shu said, "I'm guilty, it's true. I was the one who wrote it, but I don't dare ask for the patriarchship, only for the master's consideration as to whether your disciple has acquired enough wisdom to understand what is truly important or not." The fifth patriarch said, "This gatha of yours shows your understanding has only reached the threshold and has not yet entered inside. If ordinary people use your gatha in their practice, they won't regress. But someone with such an understanding who seeks perfect enlightenment will never realize it. If you want to enter the door, you have to see your nature. Go back and think about it for a few days and write me another gatha. And if you're able to enter the door and see your nature, I will give you the robe and Dharma." Shen Shu left, but after several days, he hadn't written anything. Just a total writer's block. He couldn't come up with with anything better than what he'd written before. And then as the story goes on, there is a novice monk who's walking past the milling room where Huineng is busily working hulling rice. And Huineng hears him reciting this gatha. And Huineng then thinks about it and he thinks, well, I can write a poem. Although, remember, he's illiterate. So he asks someone who could write it on the wall of the west corridor. He has to be shown the way to that because he hasn't really been out of the milling room the whole time he's been there. He asks somebody to show him the way to the wall of the west corridor and write on the wall so that he could reveal his mind. Unless you know your own mind, studying the Dharma is useless. But once you know your own mind and see your nature, you understand what is truly important. So here are he wrote two gathas on the wall. The first one goes, "Bodhi mind doesn't have any trees. This mirror doesn't have a stand. Our Buddha nature is forever pure. Where do you get this dust?" It's the first one. And the second one is, "The mind is the Bodhi tree. The body is the mirror's stand. The mirror itself is so clean, dust has no place to land." So the assistant, writes this on the wall for Huineng, and Huineng goes back to his milling room. But the fifth patriarch, the abbot, finds out who has written these additional poems. And he calls Huineng back to his room in the night. He says, at the beginning of the third watch, the fifth patriarch called me into his room, and the fifth watch starts at about 11 p.m. It called me into his room and explained the Diamond Sutra to me. As soon as I heard the words, I understood. And that night, unknown to anyone, I received the Dharma. As he transmitted the robe and the direct teaching to me, I became the sixth patriarch. The robe is an embodiment of trust that has been handed down from one generation to the next, but the Dharma is transmitted from mind to mind and must be realized by people themselves. Then the fifth patriarch said, Huineng, since ancient times, the lives of those to whom this teaching has been transmitted have hung by a thread. If you stay here, someone will harm you. You must leave at once. And of course, there's more to the story, and we'll get to that in future weeks. To complicate the fact that there are many translations of the Platform Sutra, which is what we're reading, there are also different editions that came out at different times in history. And I would like you to read, I'd like to read a short section from a later edition of the Platform Sutra, in which the poem is translated as this. Bodhi, awakening, originally has no tree. The bright mirror has no stand. There is not a single thing. Where could the dust alight? And the interaction with the patriarch goes like this in that edition. The patriarch used a Buddhist robe to cover the lights of the windows so that no one could see them as they preached the Diamond Sutra. Down to the line, they should give rise to an intention with a mind which does not abide in anything. I awakened in that instant, aware that the 10,000 dharmas are not separate from the self-nature. I addressed the fifth patriarch, saying, how unexpected that one's self-nature is originally pure. How unexpected that self-nature is beyond the beginning and end. How unexpected that one's self-nature is already complete. How unexpected that one's self-nature is unswerving and unshakable. How unexpected that one's self-nature is what gives rise to 10,000 dharmas. The fifth patriarch knew that I had already awakened to one's self-nature, so he said, if you do not recognize your original mind, studying the Dharma is useless. But if one can realize the original mind, witnessing one's original nature, then one is called a true, mature human being and a teacher of all, a Buddha. And Huineng says, or Huineng says, I received the Dharma at midnight without anyone knowing about it. So, so this is a story of two poems in a way, and a story of two versions of our human situation, our human experience. The one poem written by the head monk, the precept instructor, was about sort of keeping the mind clean, constantly working, keeping the mind clean, dusting, dusting, dusting. It kind of reminded me of viewing the self as a little house in constant need of repair, and going about here and there, repairing plaster, tuck pointing the masonry, replacing the shingles on the roof, trying to keep the place as nice as you can, a never-ending project of self-improvement. It's kind of insular and static. You're trying to maintain this thing of self, to keep it dust-free and perfect. An exhausting project. Huineng's poem has a different feel. To me, it's more like a river. The self is a river flowing toward the sea, open, receptive, responding to conditions. Dynamic and constant change. But even that analogy has a problem that rivers are confined by their banks and their bottom. This is like a river with no banks and no bottom, unbounded. And of course, rivers are constantly changing in the sense of flowing, but they're also changing course. And interestingly, sometimes there are what are called avulsions of rivers, where there's a sudden event that just brings about the river changing completely and going to a different riverbed. Such a thing occurred in Missouri in the early 19th century. There was or could have been the end of the 19th century. In any case, quite a while ago, there was an avulsion of the Mississippi River that resulted in the city of Kaskaskia, Illinois, all of a sudden being on the west side of the Mississippi. So the Mississippi River was used as a demarcation between Illinois and Mississippi. So that explains why there is still the town of Kaskaskia, no longer a big city, but a village on the west side of the Mississippi. And because the original riverbed is what by law was considered the demarcation between Illinois and Missouri, there is a little part of Illinois to the west of the Mississippi in what would normally be Missouri. I go through all of that just to talk about how there can be sudden avulsions of the self, sudden changes, dramatic. And there can also be subtle changes which are constantly occurring. So there are course corrections in response to conditions of a river. And the self, there are constant course corrections. Constant process of learning from what happens, responding to the consequences of your actions, responding to the consequences of speech. And this is the framework for the notion of repentance, repentance in Buddhism, which we'll talk about more later, and Huineng will get to in some of his teachings. It has a different feel and it's a different approach than the project of trying to keep a house the same, trying to keep it perfect. but rather it's a project of moving through life, a constant flow, a constant dynamism, with course corrections occurring constantly. So I think I'll stop there. But instead of sort of raising a question for the breakout rooms, I think I'll share a poem. And this poem is by Gregory Corso, who's one of the lesser-known beat poets, a friend of Allen Ginsberg. And it comes to mind because there's an exhibit at the St. Louis Art Museum by Anselm Kiefer, and this poem is a central feature in some of the works displayed there. So this is a section from the poem Spirit by Gregory Corso, and it's a verse that he chose to use as an epitaph when he died. Spirit is life, it flows through you, the death of me endlessly like a river, unafraid of becoming the sea. Spirit is life, it flows through the death of me, endlessly like a river, unafraid of becoming the sea.